I never thought my relationship with my son-in-law would deteriorate to the point where I'd be standing outside my own daughter's house, staring at a door that had just been slammed in my face. All because of my father's bourbon collection, a legacy that meant everything to me and absolutely nothing to him. My name is Robert. I'm 58 years old, and for most of my life I've prided myself on being a reasonable man. I built my construction business from nothing, raised my daughter Emma to be independent and strong-willed, and maintained a deep connection with my late father through the one passion we shared, collecting rare bourbon whiskey. My father wasn't a wealthy man by any means. He worked as a master carpenter for 40 years, saving what little he could to purchase a bottle of fine bourbon once or twice a year. By the time he passed away 5 years ago, he had amassed a modest collection of about 30 bottles, some of which had become quite valuable. But to me, each bottle represented a memory. Christmas mornings when he'd let me have a tiny sip, celebrations of business milestones, and quiet evenings on the porch where he taught me everything he knew about woodworking and whiskey. When Emma met Derek 3 years ago, I was genuinely happy for her. She was 27, had a promising career as an architect, and seemed truly in love. Derek was charming, ambitious, working in finance, and seemed to make her happy. That was enough for me, at least initially. The first time I invited Derek to my home for dinner, I noticed how his eyes lingered on my bourbon cabinet. "That's quite a collection you've got there," he said, an appreciative whistle escaping his lips. "It was my father's," I replied simply. "Been adding to it since he passed." Mind if I take a look?" he asked, already moving toward the glass cabinet before I could respond. I remember feeling a slight unease as he examined each bottle, commenting on their market values rather than their histories. Still, I opened one of the more common bottles that evening, and we shared a drink. Emma beamed at the two most important men in her life getting along, and I pushed my reservations aside. Their wedding last year was beautiful. Emma looked radiant, and even my ex-wife Patricia behaved civilly. I gave a heartfelt speech and presented the couple with a bottle from my collection. Not one of my father's originals, but a fine bottle I'd added myself. Derek seemed pleased enough, though I caught him eyeing the label, likely assessing its worth. The problems began about 6 months into their marriage. Derek started dropping by my house unexpectedly, often when he knew I'd be working late at the construction site. Emma would call later, mentioning casually that Derek had stopped by to borrow some tools or check on the house. Each time I noticed subtle changes in my bourbon cabinet, bottles slightly rearranged, or the cabinet door left unlocked when I always kept it secured. Then one evening, while looking for a particular bottle I wanted to enjoy, I discovered that one of my father's most prized possessions, a 1980 Pappy Van Winkle he'd saved years to purchase, was missing. In its place was a newer, much less valuable bottle positioned to fill the gap. My stomach dropped. That bottle was the last one my father and I had shared together before his cancer diagnosis. We'd only had a small glass each, preserving the rest for some future special occasion that never came. I called Emma immediately. "Is Derek there?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "He's out with clients," she replied. "Everything okay, Dad?" I hesitated, not wanting to create problems in their marriage. "When he gets home, could you ask him to call me? It's about the bourbon collection." That night I lay awake, thinking about confronting Derek. Perhaps there was an explanation. Maybe he'd borrowed it for a special work event and planned to replace it. Maybe Emma had taken it for their anniversary and forgotten to mention it. But deep down, I knew. I'd seen how Derek had changed after the wedding. The designer clothes, the new sports car, the constant entertaining of clients at exclusive restaurants. Emma had mentioned they were stretching themselves a bit financially, but assured me they had everything under control. Derek didn't call that night or the next day. When I tried reaching him, he was always in meetings or just stepping into something important. Emma started to sound worried when I called too often asking for him. Finally, a week later, I drove to their home unannounced. It was a Saturday morning and both their cars were in the driveway. Emma answered the door in her pajamas, coffee mug in hand, looking surprised to see me. "Dad, what are you doing here so early?" "I need to speak with Derek," I said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "Is he home?" "He's upstairs in his office," she replied, her brow furrowing. "Is everything okay?" I headed for the stairs, hearing Emma following behind me. When I reached Derek's office door, I knocked firmly. "Come in," he called, sounding distracted. I pushed open the door to find him seated at his desk, laptop open, dressed in a crisp button-down despite the weekend. What caught my eye, however, was the glass tumbler beside his computer, filled with an amber liquid I recognized immediately. "That's my father's bourbon," I said quietly. Derek looked up, surprised, then composed his features into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Robert, good to see you. Yes, it's that bottle you shared with us at Christmas. Excellent stuff." I stepped closer to the desk. "No, it's not. That's the 1980 Pappy Van Winkle, my father's prized bottle, the one that's missing from my cabinet." The air in the room changed instantly. Emma gasped softly behind me. Derek's smile faltered only slightly. "Oh, that. Emma said it would be fine to borrow it for a client meeting. I was going to replace it." I turned to my daughter, whose face had gone pale. "I never said that," she whispered, looking between us in confusion. "It must have been a misunderstanding then," Derek said smoothly, closing his laptop. "No harm done. I'll get you another bottle." "You can't just get another bottle," I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. "That particular bourbon is extremely rare now, but more importantly, it was the last bottle my father and I shared before he died. It has sentimental value you couldn't possibly replace." Derek stood, straightening his shirt. "Look, Robert, I understand you're upset, but these bottles are sitting in a cabinet gathering dust. They're meant to be enjoyed, not hoarded like some dragon's treasure." "Derek!" Emma exclaimed, clearly shocked by his tone. "What?" he shot back. "Your dad has dozens of bottles worth thousands of dollars just sitting there. Do you know what we could do with that kind of money right now, with the mortgage and your student loans?" I felt a cold realization wash over me. "This isn't the first bottle you've taken, is it?" Derek's silence was answer enough. "How many?" I demanded. "Just a few," he finally admitted, having the decency to look slightly embarrassed. "The ones I knew would be valuable to certain clients. It's helped me secure some important accounts." "You've been stealing from my father's collection to impress your clients?" I was struggling to maintain my composure. "I wouldn't call it stealing," Derek said defensively. "We're family. I was planning to replace them eventually." "With what?" I asked. "Some of those bottles are irreplaceable now." "They're just bottles of alcohol," Derek snapped, his charming facade finally cracking. "Your obsession with them is unhealthy. Emma agrees with me." I looked at my daughter, who shook her head vehemently. "I never said that," she insisted. "Dad, I had no idea he was taking bottles from your collection." Derek scoffed. "You've commented plenty of times about how your dad needs to let go of your grandfather's things. Don't pretend otherwise now." Emma looked devastated. "I meant emotionally, not this. Dad, I swear I didn't know." I believed her. Emma had always been honest with me, even when the truth was difficult. But the revelation that she'd discussed my unhealthy attachment to my father's memories behind my back stung deeply. "I want the bottles back," I said firmly to Derek. "All of them. Whatever you haven't opened or given away." Derek laughed, a short, dismissive sound that made my blood boil. "That's not happening. Like I said, they've been put to good use. Better use than collecting dust in your shrine." I took a step toward him, then stopped myself. "Those bottles were my father's legacy to me. They represented our relationship, our shared passion. They weren't yours to take or give away. They're just things, Robert, Derek said condescendingly. You need to let go. I looked at my son-in-law, this man who had charmed his way into our family only to reveal his true character, and realized there was nothing more to say. I turned to Emma, whose eyes were filled with tears. I'm sorry, Dad, she whispered. This isn't your fault, I assured her, though part of me wondered if she truly had no knowledge of what Derek had been doing. But I need you to understand what those bottles meant to me. I do understand, she insisted. Derek interrupted with an exasperated sigh. This is ridiculous. They're bottles of whiskey, not family heirlooms. That was when something in me snapped. I turned to face him fully, drawing myself up to my full height, still a solid 6 feet at 58 years old, and with the muscle mass of someone who'd spent a lifetime in construction. To you, they might just be expensive bottles to impress clients or sell for profit, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. But to me, they are memories of my father. Each one represents a moment we shared, a milestone we celebrated, or a lesson he taught me. You wouldn't understand that, because you clearly don't value anything that can't be assigned a dollar amount. Derek rolled his eyes, which only fueled my anger. I want what remains of my collection back, I stated firmly. Today. Not happening, Derek replied, crossing his arms. Consider it a contribution to your daughter's financial future. I looked at Emma, who appeared torn and deeply uncomfortable. Emma, I need to know where you stand on this. She hesitated, glancing between us. I think Derek should return what's left of the collection, she finally said, her voice small but resolute. Derek's face darkened. Seriously? You're taking his side? We talked about this, Emma. Your dad has plenty of money. He doesn't need to liquidate these assets, but we could really use the boost right now. We never talked about taking his bourbon without permission, Emma countered, finding her voice. That's stealing, Derek. It's family helping family, he insisted, and I didn't think I needed permission to borrow a few bottles from my father-in-law. Borrow implies you intend to return them, I pointed out, and family doesn't steal from family. Derek threw up his hands in exasperation. Fine, you want what's left? I'll show you. He stalked past us and down the hallway to their bedroom. Emma and I followed, exchanging worried glances. Derek went to their walk-in closet and pulled out a cardboard box from a high shelf. Here, he said, practically throwing the box at me. There's what's left, 3 bottles. The rest went to good use securing clients that will eventually make us all a lot of money. I looked into the box with a sinking heart. There, nestled in bubble wrap, were indeed 3 bottles from my father's collection. Not the most valuable ones in terms of market price, but each irreplaceable to me. A bourbon my father had purchased to celebrate my business's first profitable year. One we'd shared when Emma was born, and one he'd given me on his deathbed, telling me to save it for when you really need to feel me near. How many were there originally? Emma asked quietly. 10, Derek admitted without a trace of remorse. The others were strategic investments in our future. 10, I repeated, feeling numb. 1/3 of my father's entire collection gone. You took 10 bottles without asking, without even mentioning it. I didn't think you'd miss them, Derek said with a shrug. You hardly ever drink them anyway. That's not the point. I finally lost my composure, my voice echoing in the bedroom. They weren't just for drinking. They were memories, connections to my father. Emma placed a hand on my arm. Dad, I'm so sorry, I had no idea. Derek made a derisive sound. This is exactly the unhealthy attachment I was talking about. They're material possessions, Robert, not your actual father. I looked at this man, my son-in-law, and saw him clearly for perhaps the first time. The charm, the confidence, the ambition, They masked something hollow, something that couldn't understand the value of sentimental connection. "I'm taking these 3 bottles home," I said firmly, clutching the box. "And I expect you to make restitution for the others." Derek scoffed. "Restitution? Like financial compensation? You're joking." "I'm not asking for money," I clarified, "though God knows some of those bottles were worth thousands. I'm asking you to acknowledge what you did was wrong and find a way to make it right." "Fine," Derek said dismissively. I acknowledged that taking the bottles without asking explicitly was inconsiderate. "There, happy now?" Emma looked mortified. "Derek, that's not a real apology." "What more does he want?" Derek demanded. "I said I was inconsiderate. Now can we move on from this ridiculous overreaction?" I shook my head, realizing this conversation was pointless. "Emma, we need to talk privately," I said, "without Derek." "She's my wife," Derek interjected. "Anything you have to say to her, you can say in front of me." "It's okay, Derek," Emma said quietly. "I need to speak with my dad alone." Derek's face flushed with anger. "So you're both ganging up on me now, over some old bottles of whiskey?" "This isn't about the whiskey anymore," I told him. "This is about respect, honesty, and trust, all of which you've damaged today." Derek threw up his hands. "Fine. Have your little private chat. I'm going for a drive." He grabbed his keys from the dresser and stormed out, not even looking at Emma as he passed. We listened to his footsteps pounding down the stairs, followed by the front door slamming and his car engine roaring to life. When we were alone, Emma collapsed onto the edge of the bed, her face in her hands. "Dad, I'm so sorry. I had no idea he was taking your bourbon collection." I sat beside her, the box of remaining bottles on my lap. "I believe you," I said gently. "But Emma, I need you to be honest with me now. Has Derek done things like this before? Taking things that don't belong to him, lying about it?" Emma was quiet for a long moment. "Not exactly like this," she finally said. "But there have been incidents. Times when money went missing from my purse, or when things I was saving for suddenly got spent on something for him. He always has explanations, and they always sound reasonable in the moment." My heart sank. "Emma, that's concerning." "I know," she whispered. "I've been trying to tell myself it's just the financial pressure we're under. The house is more than we can really afford, and Derek's job isn't as secure as he made it sound. But he keeps saying we need to maintain appearances for his career." I put my arm around her shoulders. "Financial pressure doesn't excuse theft or lying, especially not from family." "I know that," she said, wiping away tears. "I just don't know what to do. I love him, Dad, but sometimes I feel like I don't really know him. The Derek I fell in love with would never have done something like this." I took a deep breath, choosing my words carefully. "Sometimes people show us who they really are only after we've committed to them. The question is, what do you do with that information?" Emma nodded, understanding my implication. "I need time to think, to talk to him when we're both calmer. This isn't the only issue we've been having." "You know I'm here for you, whatever you decide," I assured her. "Your mother and I didn't raise you to stay in situations that aren't healthy for you." "Thanks, Dad." She leaned against my shoulder the way she used to as a little girl. "I really am sorry about the bourbon collection. I know how much it meant to you." "The bottles that are gone," I said, trying to make peace with that fact. "What matters now is how we move forward." We talked for another hour, Emma opening up about other troubling aspects of her marriage, Derek's controlling behavior with their finances, his dismissiveness of her career ambitions, his habit of rewriting history when confronted with his actions. It was worse than I had feared, but I was grateful she was finally seeing the patterns. When I finally prepared to leave, Emma walked me to the door. "I'll talk to him tonight," she promised. About everything, not just the bourbon. Call me after, no matter how late, I insisted. And remember, you always have a home with me if you need it. She nodded, hugging me tightly. I drove home with the 3 recovered bottles safely beside me, my heart heavy with concern for my daughter, but also with a strange sense of relief. The truth, however painful, was finally out in the open. When I reached my house, I carefully returned the 3 bottles to my father's cabinet, noting the empty spaces where the others had been. I ran my fingers along the wood edge that my father had crafted himself to house his collection, remembering how his eyes would light up when he added a new bottle, each one representing months of saving. The sound of my phone ringing pulled me from my thoughts. It was Emma. "Dad," she said, her voice tight with emotion. "Derek just got home. He's furious that I took your side and says I need to choose between you and him right now." My heart raced with concern. "Are you safe? Do you want me to come get you?" "No, I'm okay," she assured me. "He's not violent, just cold and manipulative. But Dad, I think I need to come stay with you for a few days while I figure things out. Can I bring some clothes over tonight?" "Of course," I said without hesitation. "I'll make up the guest room." We ended the call, and I stood looking at my father's bourbon cabinet, feeling a complex mix of emotions. The loss of those bottles still hurt, but they had ultimately revealed a truth my daughter needed to see. Perhaps, in their own way, they had served their purpose, protecting our family one last time, just as my father always strove to do. I spent the next few hours preparing the guest room for Emma. The house that had felt too large and empty since my divorce from Patricia, and even more so after my father passed, suddenly seemed to have purpose again. I changed the sheets, dusted the surfaces, and set out fresh towels in the adjoining bathroom, small gestures that helped calm my racing thoughts. Around 8 that evening, I heard Emma's car pull into the driveway. When I opened the front door, I was shocked to see her struggling with 3 large suitcases, her eyes red and puffy. "I didn't expect you to bring so much," I said, hurrying to help her. "It's not just clothes," she explained as we carried her things inside. "It's important documents, my laptop with work projects, some family photos, things I couldn't leave behind." The implication hung heavy in the air. She wasn't planning a brief cooling-off period. Emma had made a decision. Once we'd settled her bags in the guest room, we sat at the kitchen table, where I prepared a simple dinner neither of us had much appetite for. Emma looked exhausted, the kind of bone-deep weariness that comes from emotional battles. "What happened after we spoke?" I finally asked. Emma wrapped her hands around her mug of tea. "Derek came home even angrier than when he left. He'd been drinking. Not bourbon, just whatever he could get at the corner bar." She gave a humorless laugh. "He started by accusing me of always taking your side, saying I was Daddy's little girl who couldn't think for myself." My jaw tightened, but I remained silent, letting her continue. "Then he switched tactics, saying he only took the bourbon because we're in financial trouble. He claimed he was trying to protect me from knowing how bad things really are." She looked up at me. "Dad, he maxed out 3 credit cards I didn't even know we had. The house is 2 months behind on payments. He's been lying about everything." "Oh, Emma," I sighed, reaching across to squeeze her hand. "It gets worse," she continued. "When I pressed him about it, he admitted he's been gambling, not just client entertaining like he claimed, actual gambling, losing thousands. That's where the bourbon went, to pay debts, to place new bets he was sure would turn everything around." I closed my eyes briefly, the picture becoming clearer. "And the bottles were easy to take, easy to sell." Emma nodded miserably. "He said your obsession with them made you an easy target, that you deserved to lose them for being so materialistic about old booze." She wiped away fresh tears. "How could I have been so blind? The man I married would never have said such cruel things." "The man you thought you married," I corrected gently. "People like Derek are expert chameleons. They show you exactly what you want to see until they no longer need to maintain the illusion. I told him I knew about the gambling, about the lies, and that I couldn't stay with someone I couldn't trust," Emma continued. "That's when things got ugly. He said if I left, he'd make sure I got nothing in the divorce, that his name is on the house, the cars, even most of our bank accounts." My construction-calloused hands clenched into fists. "That's not how divorce works, and he knows it. That's just another manipulation tactic." "I know," Emma said. "I'm an architect, not an idiot. I understand community property laws." But it was the way he said it, so cold, so calculated, like he'd been planning for this possibility all along. I hesitated before asking my next question. "Emma, did he threaten you in any other way? Physically?" She shook her head quickly. "No, nothing like that. Derek's weapon has always been emotional manipulation, not physical intimidation. When he realized threats weren't working, he switched to pleading, crying, promising he'd change." "And you didn't believe him?" "Not this time," she said firmly. "I've heard those promises before, after smaller betrayals. Something broke today, Dad. I saw him clearly for the first time, not as the charming man I fell in love with, but as he truly is. I deserved better than what he's put me through." Pride swelled in my chest at her strength. Emma had always been resilient, even as a child, but seeing her stand up for herself in such a profound way filled me with admiration. "I'm filing for divorce," she stated, her voice steadier now. "I already called Patricia for a recommendation on attorneys. I'm meeting with someone on Monday." I nodded, slightly surprised she'd reached out to her mother before me for this, but understanding the wisdom of it. Patricia was a shrewd businesswoman who'd navigated her own difficult divorce from me with remarkable efficiency. Her advice on these matters would be valuable. "What can I do to help?" I asked. "Just this," Emma gestured around her. "A safe place to stay, no judgment, maybe help moving my things out when the time comes." "Of course," I promised. "Whatever you need." Later that night, as Emma slept in the guest room, I found myself standing before my bourbon cabinet again. I opened it and carefully removed the bottle my father had given me on his deathbed, the one he told me to save for when I really needed to feel him near. This certainly qualified. I poured a small measure into a crystal tumbler and sat in my father's old armchair, the one item from his house I couldn't bear to part with after he died. Raising the glass slightly in a silent toast, I took a sip, letting the complex flavors remind me of him. Strong, nuanced, occasionally difficult, but ultimately warm and comforting. "I wish you were here, Dad," I whispered to the empty room. "You'd know exactly what to say to Emma. You always knew how to make things right." As I sat there, I realized something important. My father hadn't left me his bourbon collection as an investment or even as material possessions to be coveted. He'd left them as physical anchors for his wisdom, his love, his presence in my life. Each bottle wasn't valuable because of its rarity or price tag. It was valuable because of the memories and lessons attached to it. The next morning, Emma and I sat on the back porch with coffee, watching the sunrise, something we hadn't done together since she was a teenager. The morning light softened the signs of stress on her face, and for a moment I could see glimpses of the little girl who used to climb into my lap with picture books. "I've been thinking," I said carefully, "about what happens next." Emma nodded, waiting for me to continue. "Derek's behavior was inexcusable, but I'm concerned about what he might do when he realizes you're serious about the divorce. Men like him don't handle rejection well, especially when it threatens their self-image." "I've thought about that too," Emma admitted. "That's why I brought all my important documents and work files. I wouldn't put it past him to try to hold them hostage or even destroy them out of spite." I hesitated before asking my next question. "Has he tried contacting you since you left yesterday?" Emma's expression darkened, 27 texts and 16 calls. I stopped reading and answering after the first few turned from apologetic to accusatory. He's flipping between begging me to come home and threatening to ruin me professionally if I don't. We should document all of that, I advised. Your attorney will want records of any threatening communications. Already screenshotted everything, she confirmed. I'm not that naive little girl anymore, Dad. I see the situation clearly now. We sat in companionable silence for a while until Emma spoke again. There's something else I need to tell you. About the bourbon collection. I tensed involuntarily. What about it? After you left yesterday, before Derek came home and everything exploded, I did some investigating, she explained. I found receipts in Derek's email, records of the sales of those bottles. 7 of them went to a private collector in Chicago. My heart leaped with hope. You know who has them? Emma nodded. Not just that. I know what Derek was paid for them, and I've already reached out to the buyer. I explained the situation, that they were stolen family heirlooms, not Derek's to sell. The collector was surprisingly understanding. He collects for the history and stories behind rare bourbons as much as for the bourbon itself. And, I prompted, hardly daring to hope, he's willing to return them, Emma said with a small smile, for what he paid, not what they're actually worth. It's still a lot, almost $30,000, but considerably less than their market value. I let out a long breath. 7 out of the 10 missing bottles. It was more than I dared hope for. Emma, that's incredible news. But I can't let you spend that kind of money, especially not now. It's not my money, she said firmly. I'm going after Derek for it. The receipts prove he sold property that wasn't his to sell. My attorney thinks we have a solid case for restitution as part of the divorce proceedings. I shook my head in amazement at my daughter's resourcefulness. You've thought of everything. I learned from the best, she said, squeezing my hand. You and Grandpa both taught me to fight for what matters, but to do it the right way. That afternoon, we were interrupted by the sound of a car pulling into my driveway, Derek's sleek black Audi. Emma and I exchanged concerned glances. Stay inside, I told her. Let me handle this. Dad, no, she protested. This is my battle. We'll face it together then, I compromised, but let me do the talking initially. We moved to the front door, just as Derek's aggressive knocking began. When I opened it, I was struck by his disheveled appearance, a far cry from his usual polished presentation. His eyes were bloodshot, his expensive shirt wrinkled and untucked. Where is she? He demanded without preamble. Hello to you too, Derek, I replied calmly, blocking the doorway with my body. At 58, I wasn't as spry as I once was, but decades in construction had kept me strong. Emma doesn't want to speak with you right now. That's not your decision to make, he snapped. She's my wife, and she's my daughter, I countered, and she's made her wishes clear. I suggest you respect them. Derek's face contorted with anger. This is your doing, isn't it? You've poisoned her against me over some stupid bottles of whiskey. Emma stepped forward to stand beside me. This isn't about the bourbon, Derek. It's about trust, respect, and honesty, none of which you've shown lately. Derek's demeanor instantly changed at the sight of her, his anger morphing into a pleading expression. Emma, baby, please. I know I messed up, but we can fix this. Come home and we'll talk it through. There's nothing to talk about, Emma said firmly. I've seen the credit card statements, the gambling receipts, the bourbon sales. I know everything, Derek. His face paled visibly. You went through my emails. That's invasion of privacy. I couldn't help but laugh at the irony. That's rich coming from someone who stole and sold family heirlooms behind our backs. Derek's gaze hardened as he looked at me. This doesn't concern you, old man. This is between me and my wife. Former wife, soon enough, Emma corrected. I've already contacted an attorney. You'll be served with divorce papers this week. Panic flashed across Derek's face. "You can't do this. Think about what people will say. Think about your career, our future." "I'm thinking about my future," Emma replied. "And I don't see you in it." I watched him drive away, his expensive car accelerating aggressively down my quiet street. Only when he was out of sight did I allow my shoulders to slump, feeling the weight of his words and the situation pressing down on me. Was I clinging to the past? Had my attachment to my father's bourbon collection been excessive or unhealthy, as Derek suggested? I walked slowly back to the cabinet, looking at the bottles, now with noticeable gaps, and tried to examine my feelings honestly. No, I decided. Valuing keepsakes that connected me to my late father wasn't pathological. The bottles were symbols of our relationship, physical reminders of time spent together. Derek's inability to understand that spoke to his own limitations, not mine. I called Emma to warn her about Derek's visit, but she didn't pick up. I left a brief, calm message letting her know he'd stopped by, that I was fine, and that she should call me when she could. The rest of the day passed slowly. I tried to focus on work, reviewing plans for a renovation project, but my mind kept returning to the confrontation with Derek and my concern for Emma. By evening, when she still hadn't returned my call, I started to worry. Finally, around 7, I heard her car in the driveway. When she came through the door, her expression was strained but resolute. "Sorry I didn't call back," she said, setting down her work bag. "After I got your message, Derek showed up at my office. I didn't want to talk to you until I'd sorted through everything." My concern deepened. "He went to your office? What happened?" Emma sank onto the couch, kicking off her heels. "He brought flowers, made a scene in front of my colleagues about wanting to reconcile. It was mortifying, but also illuminating." "How so?" I asked, sitting across from her. "It was all for show," she explained, running a hand through her hair. "He wasn't trying to actually speak with me privately or resolve anything. He was performing for an audience, creating a narrative where he's the devoted husband, trying to save his marriage while I'm being difficult." I nodded, unsurprised but saddened. That tracks with how he was here. Very rehearsed, very focused on appearances. After he left, my boss called me into his office. Apparently, Derek has been calling him for weeks, asking about my work hours, who I meet with, even trying to access my work calendar. She shook her head in disbelief. "My boss has been deflecting, thankfully, but he was concerned enough to tell me today." "That's disturbing," I said, trying to keep my alarm from showing too clearly. "It gets worse," Emma continued. "I called our bank from work just to check our accounts. Derek has emptied our joint savings account, the one with the money I've been saving for starting my own architecture firm someday. Over $40,000 gone." I felt a surge of anger on her behalf. "Can you dispute it?" She shook her head. "It's a joint account. He had every legal right to withdraw the funds. The bank representative said there's nothing they can do." We sat in silence for a moment, absorbing the implications. This wasn't just about bourbon anymore. This was about a fundamental breach of trust on multiple levels. "I've made an appointment with a lawyer tomorrow," Emma finally said, "just to understand my options. I'm not making any decisions yet, but I need to protect myself." "That's wise," I agreed. "And the marriage counselor?" "I called one," she said. "They can see us next week if I decide to try that route. But honestly, Dad, I'm not sure there's anything to save at this point." I reached across and squeezed her hand. "Whatever you decide, I support you." She smiled weakly. "I know, that's why I'm here." Over dinner, Emma shared more discoveries she'd made throughout the day. Credit cards Derek had opened in her name that she hadn't known about. Suspicious charges for gifts that had never been given to her. Evidence that he'd been monitoring her email. The picture that emerged was deeply troubling. "How did I miss all the signs?" she asked, pushing her food around her plate. "Am I really that naive?" You're not naive, I assured her. People like Derek are skilled at deception. They show you exactly what you want to see until they no longer feel the need to maintain the facade. She nodded slowly. The bourbon collection was just the catalyst, wasn't it? It forced everything else into the open. Sometimes that's how truth works, I reflected. One small crack reveals the larger flaws in the foundation. As we were clearing the dishes, Emma's phone rang. It was Derek again. She silenced it with a sigh. He's called 17 times today. Left voicemails swinging between apologetic and accusatory. I can't deal with it anymore tonight. You don't have to, I assured her. Turn off your phone if you need to. She nodded, then hesitated. Would it be okay if I stayed here for more than a few days? Maybe a couple of weeks? I need time to figure out my next steps, and I don't feel safe going back to the house right now. This is your home for as long as you need it, I said without hesitation. Always has been, always will be. She hugged me tightly, and for a moment she was my little girl again, the one who'd run to me with skinned knees or broken toys, trusting that I could fix whatever was wrong. Only this time, I couldn't fix it for her. I could only stand beside her while she fixed it herself. The next day, while Emma was meeting with the lawyer, Derek showed up at my door again. This time, his friendly facade was entirely gone. "Where is she?" he demanded when I opened the door. "Not here," I said truthfully. "And even if she was, I wouldn't tell you if she didn't want to see you." He stepped forward aggressively, and I stood my ground, not intimidated by his attempt to physically dominate the space. "You've poisoned her against me," he accused. "Turned my wife against me over some stupid bottles of liquor." "Emma is making her own decisions based on your actions," I countered calmly. "The bourbon was just the beginning. She's discovered a lot more since then. And B's, a flash of something, worry or guilt perhaps, crossed his face before hardening into anger again. Whatever she thinks she's discovered, there are explanations. Financial decisions I made for our future that she wouldn't understand. Like emptying the savings account she'd been building for years, I asked pointedly. Derek's eyes narrowed. "That's between me and my wife. You have no right to interfere in our marriage. And D, when my daughter feels unsafe, when she discovers financial abuse and manipulation, you better believe I'm going to support her," I said, my voice level but firm. "Financial abuse?" Derek scoffed. "That's rich coming from you, the man who refuses to help his only daughter and son-in-law when they're struggling financially while sitting on a collection worth thousands of dollars." I shook my head, seeing through his deflection. "Emma never asked for my financial help, and neither did you, until you decided to take it without asking. And let's be honest, Derek, you're not struggling financially because you can't afford necessities. You're overextended because you're living beyond your means to maintain appearances." His face flushed with anger. "You don't know anything about our finances or our life." "I know enough," I replied, "and so does Emma now." Derek took another step forward, entering my personal space. "Tell her to call me. Tell her to come home. This has gone far enough." "I'm not your messenger," I said firmly, "and I'm not going to pressure Emma to do anything she's not comfortable with." For a moment I thought he might actually try to physically intimidate me further, but something in my steady gaze must have dissuaded him. Instead, he stepped back, his expression cooling into something more calculated. "Fine," he said with forced calm. "Play it your way. But remember this moment when your daughter's marriage falls apart because you couldn't let go of the past." With that, he turned and stormed back to his car. This time, when he slammed the door in my face, it was my front door, the force of it rattling the windows. I watched him drive away again, feeling a mixture of anger and sadness. Not for myself, but for Emma, who had invested years in a relationship with someone who saw her as a possession rather than a partner. When Emma returned from her meeting with the lawyer, she looked both drained and determined. "How did it go?" I asked as she settled at the kitchen table. "Eye-opening," she admitted. "The lawyer said I have grounds for an annulment based on fraud, given what's emerged about Derek's financial deceptions before and during the marriage. But if I go that route, it could get ugly." "Are you prepared for that?" I asked gently. She thought for a moment, then nodded. "I think so. The alternative, staying with someone I can't trust, who manipulates and controls me, seems far worse in the long run." I reached for her hand. "Whatever path you choose, I'm with you every step of the way." "I know, Dad," she said, squeezing my hand. "I've always known that." Over the next 2 weeks, Emma began the difficult process of disentangling her life from Derek's. She filed for separation, opened her own bank accounts, and with the help of 2 of her closest friends, retrieved essential belongings from the house while Derek was at work. During this time, Derek's behavior grew increasingly erratic. Some days he would send flowers and heartfelt apologies. Other days he would leave threatening voicemails or send accusing texts. Emma documented everything on her lawyer's advice. One evening, as Emma and I shared a quiet dinner, she looked up from her plate with unexpected determination in her eyes. "I've been thinking about Grandpa's bourbon collection," she said. "The bottles Derek took, the ones that are gone for good." I nodded, wondering where she was going with this. "I can't replace them exactly," she continued, "but what if we started building new memories? What if we began our own collection, you and me?" I felt a surge of emotion at her suggestion. "I'd like that," I said simply. "We could find bottles that mark new milestones," she suggested, warming to the idea. "Like my first independent architecture project, or the day I finally filed for divorce." I smiled at her gallows humor. "Your grandfather would have appreciated that approach. He always said that bourbon, like life, was about moving forward while respecting the past." Emma raised her water glass in a mock toast. "To moving forward, then." To moving forward," I echoed, feeling for the first time that we truly would. 6 months later, Emma had filed for divorce, found her own apartment, and was in the early stages of planning her own architecture firm. Derek had eventually accepted the inevitable, though not without a final attempt to claim half of everything Emma owned, including, ridiculously, my father's bourbon collection, which he argued had been marital property since he'd contributed to its maintenance. The judge had seen through this transparent attempt at revenge and denied his claim outright. On the 1-year anniversary of the day Derek had slammed the door in my face, Emma came over for dinner. She brought with her a carefully wrapped package. "I found it," she said simply, handing me the box. Inside was a bottle of the 1980 Pappy Van Winkle, the exact same one Derek had taken, the last bottle my father and I had shared before his diagnosis. "How?" I asked, stunned as I held the bottle, checking the seal and label to confirm it was genuine. "It wasn't easy," Emma admitted. "Derek had given it to his boss as a gift, trying to secure a promotion. When that didn't pan out and Derek left the firm, the boss had no sentimental attachment to it. It took some detective work and more money than I care to admit, but I tracked it down and bought it back." I was speechless, running my fingers over the bottle that I'd thought was lost forever. "I couldn't recover all of them," Emma said apologetically, "but this one, the most important one, I had to try." I carefully placed the bottle back in its box and embraced my daughter tightly. "Thank you," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. Later that evening, we placed the recovered bottle in a special place in the cabinet, not back where it had been, but in a new position at the center, symbolizing both what had been lost and what had been reclaimed. Beside it, we placed a new bottle, Emma's choice to mark her fresh start, the first addition to our new shared collection. A physical reminder that while some things are irretrievably lost, new beginnings and new memories are always possible, especially when you face the future with integrity and courage. As we clinked our glasses in a toast to both the old and the new, I thought about how my father's bourbon collection had ultimately served a purpose neither of us could have anticipated, revealing truth, catalyzing necessary change, and in the end, bringing my daughter and me even closer together. Some might still see them as just bottles, but to us, they represented something far more valuable: the strength to recognize what matters, the courage to protect it, and the wisdom to know when to let go.